Hi, welcome to Romance Writers Therapy. This week we've got a guest with us, Troy Lambert of Plottr, and Marty B as usual, and Kate Pryor myself as usual.
Hi, Troy.
Hi, Troy.
Hi, guys.
How are you?
Guys. Fantastic. It is wonderful to be here. You know what is funny is I didn't even know this was a romance writers chat, so that gives me even more to talk about. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I saw in your email the part where you said you had a specific outline in your Plottr software dedicated to romancing the beat. I was like, I just want to know about that.
I know.
You need to talk about all of it.
Ooh, tell me more.
And I use it. You're going to find that I use it. I use it for two different things, and we'll talk about that. We can talk about that as we keep going. Whatever.
Awesome.
But yeah.
And you're in Idaho, right?
Yes, I am.
Brilliant. Have you always been out that way, or?
Sort of. So Idaho is what I call my boomerang state. Like I've moved away and then I've moved back and then I went in the army and traveled around for a while and then I came back and then I moved away and I came back. And so now that our kids are all gone and we're empty nesters, I've decided that this time I don't have to move away and move back. I can just stay. I can skip the other moving part. So
no more boomeranging.
No more boomeranging. I'm just going to stay this time. I mean, every time I tried to boomerang before, it came back to me. So, just might as well stay. Yeah. Besides the fact that I hate moving. And my wife and I just bought a house this summer and remodeled it. And I don't want to do this again ever for the rest of my life. So I'm good. Yeah.
How many kids do you have?
So that's a long story.
If
really.
If it's personal, please don't feel like you have to answer it.
No. So I have three of my own, but then I have a couple of stepchildren as well. So it's kind of like I have three biological kids, but if I count the kids that are kind of my kids, then I have five. So
okay,
gotcha. Sweet. Big happy family.
Yeah.
And you write your covers look very
like thriller mystery.
Yeah, exactly.
Type.
Thriller mystery. Yes. So primarily I write mysteries and thrillers. I have written a couple of romantic comedies under a pen name.
Oh, that's
fun. After the first of the year, I'll be launching a new series that's actually a mashup of romantic comedy and serial killer thrillers.
Ooh, that is very fun.
So yes, I'm doing it with a co-author, and it is about serial killers who fall in love. And all of the titles are based on like rom-com type variations of rom-com titles. So the first one in the series is titled Meet Cute, MEAT, cute. Couple cannibals.
Are there cannibals?
Okay.
You can kind of figure that one out. Yeah. My co-writer, my favorite title she's come up with so far is Bloodless in Seattle. So,
that's amazing.
There's going to be romance, blood, killing. It's going to be great. What could go wrong, right?
Okay. Well, for one thing, Troy, you don't even know you have fulfilled something that I've been trying to make Kate do.
Oh my god!
Hey,
oh my god!
Kate, this could be the start of a whole new thing.
No,
listen.
I have been trying. I have gifted her an entire plot, and she just will not take it. I want her to write a romantic comedy about a grocer and a butcher, and call it Meet Cute. She won't take it. She says it'll feel like being trapped in a Save-A-Lot.
We're looking, it's so good. We're looking for co-writers in this series. I mean, come on in. Write whatever you want. You want to write 50 First Kills? One funeral and a wedding.
Awesome.
Two funerals and a wedding, something like that.
This isn't fair because you've struck my weakness, which is punny titles. And
yes. Then you're in. You're in. We haven't even talked about Plottr yet. You're already in. You're buying Plottr. You're going to co-write with me. It's going to be awesome. I mean, look at us. We're making progress already.
I love it.
Okay, I love it. I want to hear you explain Plottr in your own words, because I'm looking at the website and it looks really cool to me.
It does,
but I also want to get your 30 second. Not doesn't have to be 30 second. What is the way you describe it to people?
So I describe it as a visual story management software.
Okay.
You could call it SMS and be really clever. But essentially what it does is it helps you not only manage your plot and your outlining and your planning of your story, but also your series Bible. So there's a
Ooh. Okay.
I
characters
love that.
and settings and notes section that allows you to manage your research and manage your, so in other words, you're managing your series, you're managing your overall, um, you're managing your overall story. Like everything about it, you can manage in one place, and your overall series you can manage in one place. So, but the biggest plus of it is all that is visual, right? So
Yeah,
the
I know. I love
visual
that.
aspects of that are like, because for me, okay, so before there was Plottr, I had whiteboards and corkboards with
Mm-hmm.
strings and like colored arrows, you know? And now
Mm-hmm.
that I have a German Shepherd, I'm certain that he would knock over the whiteboard and erase it with his tail in the middle of me writing a novel, right? And it would be over, right? Life would just
Yeah.
be over. So instead, you're doing this, first of all, digitally in a way that obviously you have backups, you know, all that kind of, all the various good things about that. But the visual aspect of looking at it, many writers are visual in our planning process, right? If you've ever seen J.K. Rowling's diagram of her plan for Harry Potter, it's a whole bunch
I
of
have never looked it
squares.
up.
Oh, it's cool, sort of. It's a whole bunch of squares on a piece of paper, like on a graph paper notebook type thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, this is just a much better way of doing that. It's just a more efficient, and the primary thing that I tell people, the biggest benefit is efficiency. The second biggest benefit is it makes your writing more fun. But I mean, part of that is efficiency, I feel like. I feel like when you get frustrated when you're going through the planning process and the planning is not working, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're more of a discovery writer, you're going through the revision process, but you really don't have a process. So you're just rewriting the first draft that you wrote, which is why
Mm-hmm.
you end up writing four drafts because it doesn't accomplish anything if you don't stop in the middle and take a look at like checking your work. And so
Mm-hmm.
Plottr gives you this incredible ability to visually check your work and see how did I do with my writing? How is my planning? Now I planned something. Now I wrote it, and if you're anything like me, what you wrote doesn't come out like what you planned exactly. Your
Mm-hmm.
characters do their own thing. Your muse throws in a wrench right in the middle of everything, whatever the case may be. And so then I check my work with like, this is what I plan to write. This is what I actually wrote. Now let me take a standard story structure like Romancing the Beat, like the romantic comedy beat sheet or whatever the case may be, and stack it up against my work and see how did I do? How's my pacing? Do I have an inciting incident? Does this scene have conflict in it or does it just need to be thrown out? Whatever the case may be.
So you can really see like the gaps in like whatever you missed the first draft.
Yeah, so your plot holes, you're basically preventing plot holes before you edit the plot holes. Because often what happens as writers is we go, okay, so I wrote the first draft, I sit down and I start writing the second draft. Well, by the time I'm halfway through that draft, I'm into the story again. So I'm reading what I think
Mm-hmm.
I wrote, all those kind of things, right? I haven't given myself
Mm-hmm.
any distance. So I'm editing grammar and punctuation in a scene I really should delete. And then my
Mm-hmm.
editor's probably going to tell me to delete later, right? So I'm wasting time, both mine and my editor's time. Now, since my editor is probably charging me for their time, I'm also
Mm-hmm.
wasting money. You know what I mean? So as a
Mm-hmm.
writer,
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
and regardless of your path to publication, okay, one of my pet peeves is just wasting time. Like I don't like to waste time.
Hmm.
I just don't like it.
Yeah.
People be like,
No,
well,
I get you.
this
It
isn't a
makes you feel
waste.
bad.
That isn't a waste. I'm like, I am an entrepreneurial mindset type person. So to me, wasting time is extremely, I'm like, I just can't, I'm seeing dollar signs when I'm wasting
Yeah.
time.
Well, and
Hmm.
So,
also time, like writing is so time intensive,
well,
and there's no way to really track how many hours have gone, at least for me, how many hours have gone into a book.
yeah,
Um, and I mean, just anywhere that you can kind of take some of the pressure off of your brain to retain
yes.
is kind of just a really nice opportunity to do. Because it's not so much the wasting of, I don't like wasting time. I tend to be a rather productive person, but I also tend to be very like, well, this decision got me to that decision sort of thing. But it's the mental drain for me. Any way that I can take something out of my brain, because I rely so heavily on it. All of my systems are so locked up top. Oh my gosh, Kate. If I would just write a note somewhere, that'd be amazing. All of my thoughts have to stay in my brain to exist, apparently.
I know. Just like pour them out into like a little cup and come back to them.
Good Lord.
No, I was reading that like, I was reading about like decision fatigue recently, about how you can only make so many decisions in a day before like the quality of them goes down, before your overall energy goes down. Like, and I like that this seems to help like kind of naturally point to things by visualize, like the way I'm seeing it, things laid out in the
it is,
sort of demo.
It looks very intuitive to use.
Yeah,
yes.
Like I love that it has like in this, like when you go on the website, it has this little looping clip of how you can pick things up and move them around, and I'm just loving this, that you have the main plot and then you can have like your character like different lines.
Well, and like I don't
that's what I've wanted for a very long time. To be able to pick things up and just plop them elsewhere.
Yeah.
Like there's the whole plot hole, I'm going to fill it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, part of the... Oh, I'm getting a weird echo. Okay, I'm going to try not to get that echo. Okay, maybe that'll fix it. So part of it is too, like that series Bible feature. The way I always describe it to people is like, what if you don't remember what color Susie's eyes were in chapter 2, right? What do you do? Well, you go back and read chapter 2. Well, if you're like me, then you're like, well, that sentence was awkward. I should probably edit that sentence and that sentence and that sentence. Oh, look at this part. I didn't really research this part thoroughly. Maybe I should research that now. And wow, there's a Quora thread about that. And look, somebody on Reddit commented about that. And suddenly I'm like down this rabbit hole. And I'm extremely knowledgeable about this one tiny little point of my novel, but I haven't written a word, right?
Yeah.
And even as a full-time writer, like you have time, right? Like I have a certain amount of time to write, but I still have life, right? I still have things that interfere, and I have to manage the business of writing. So my writing time is still precious, but I remember when I had a full-time job and I'm writing on the side and I'm writing in these few precious hours early in the morning. And I mean, you think about that, like how, like just the amount of agony of losing an hour of that time. Yeah. Right. That you just can't get back because you don't have another time in the day to write. You got kids, you got a full-time job. The way I wrote my first novel was horrific. Like I was in an office that used to be a closet under our stairs from 4:30 to 7:30 in the morning. Because I knew my kids would not get up at 4:30. Well, yeah, your kids aren't going to get up at 4:30. I always tell parents,
no, they do
I don't know if I want to get up early in the morning. I'm like, look, my kids, I don't know about your kids, but my kids, if I stayed up late, they would come into my office. Dad, why do you get to stay? I got to go to bed. And can I have a glass of water? And, but 4:30, my kids aren't getting up for things they wanted to do, let alone for something that their dad was trying to force them to do, right? So I'm like, look, that was my writing time. That was my precious writing time. So you weren't taken away from that. So I had to learn, because I'm a researcher by nature, to not go back and research. And that's where that series Bible information is so valuable, because it keeps you from doing that rereading, just the amount of time that alone saves you is, valuable. So valuable.
So I am a discovery writer, and you would use this in like the revision setting to double check pacing and stuff like that.
Yes, that's one of the ways that discovery writers use Plottr. I mean, I use it throughout the whole writing process. So I use it in the planning process. Then during the writing process, I use that series Bible to check facts so I don't ever go out of my writing environment. I write in Scrivener. I have Plottr open on a separate screen.
Okay.
If I
That was
need
gonna
a
be my next
fact
question.
from my series Bible, I look over at Plottr. I look back, but you can have it on another tab on your computer and just click over and click back. Right? It would
Also,
you would get the same impact, right, by
yeah.
doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But my essential thing is like I write in Scrivener. I have Plottr on the one window, and I don't ever leave that Scrivener space to go check that fact. I'm still there. That's still central on my screen. And so overall, I just spend less time going back and forth. And it makes that time, my word counts are higher, it's more productive, but also my first draft is better because I don't have as many of those blocks that I put in there, like what color were her eyes, that keep me from going back and looking, or insert gun here. Instead, I've
exactly.
got reference right there. You know what I mean? So the revision process goes faster too. And the first draft is better. I'm never going to tell you you're going to write great first drafts because you're just not. I mean, 30 novels in, and I'm like, I just did Nano, right, with a group that I did for Plottr, and I wrote a horrible first draft. Go ahead and let yourself write a horrible first draft because they're all going to be horrible. So just live with it, accept it, right? But you can keep making them better to a certain extent. So, yeah.
There's less to clean up because you've done this before and you know how to set yourself up for better revisions.
Right. And
sense?
hopefully your story structure gets better because as you write more stories and at the same time you consume and study more stories, then you get that innate sense of story structure and you're just better at this. You're just
absolutely.
You just get better. And that's the other thing I use Plottr for is studying story structures. I take apart a movie or a show that I liked or a book that I liked and figure out why did it work? Why was it good and this other one wasn't? And then how can I apply that to my writing?
So you'll actually take like the plot points and plug them into Plottr and see how they lay out?
Yep. I'll rip it apart
That's
scene
fun.
by scene.
Yeah.
One of the things I've done, so I'm a big fan of Breaking Bad. I don't know if you guys like Breaking Bad.
I have only seen the first season. My husband is helping me watch
so no spoilers.
Like literally, we just started. But I know how it ends. But like,
okay.
I literally just started like a month ago.
Wow.
But yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
so
I know.
No spoilers. No spoilers. But so unlike other TV series that you see at times, right? Vince Gilligan, the guy who created it, had a plot in mind for the overall series when he started. So he had an ending in mind when he started. So he had a 3-act structure for the whole thing, right? The whole series.
That's really incredible. Yeah.
But each season has its own 3-act structure. And each episode has its own 3-act structure. So you can go to season 1 and see midpoint season 1, and it lines up with like the midpoint of a pretty standard 3-act structure. Right? And so you can study that and see the reason people love this show so much and it's so brilliant, besides the writing and the content itself, is because the structure spoke to them of a good story. They could tell this was a good story being told well. Right? And because we've all had those things where you go to a movie and you go, man, that movie was a great idea, but the movie just wasn't good. What happened?
Yeah.
Well, usually something's wrong with the structure. Now, what a reader or a normal viewer will tell you is something felt wrong about that movie, right? They don't know what it was, but they know something felt wrong. To us as writers, we know if we take it apart, we know what was wrong with it. We can figure that out. And then we can go, okay, that's not something I want to do in my own writing. I want to prevent that in my own writing. Right.
That's definitely something that Marty and I have talked about.
I was just going to make this comment too. Go
ahead. Because we talk about this a lot, going and seeing movies, whether good or bad movies. And, thinking, I would have done this with that if I could have, like if I could have just, grabbed the director and shaken him by the shoulders, like, that's me. That's me talking like that. Marty's like, yeah, I would have done that differently. Not so much. passive
the
aggressive,
physical assault.
Just being,
not so much physical assault, but still, I mean, you think about that, right?
Well, but it's so much easier to see what is working or what isn't working. It's so much easier to find the flaw and why something didn't execute correctly than it is to see like what did work right. Like, why did I respond so well to that?
Right.
It is harder to put your finger on.
Here's the reason why that's hard to put your finger on. Okay, so when we talk about editing your work, right, we often talk about getting distance from your work. So some people say, wait 2 months, right, before you reread that story. But except that doesn't really work. Because you wrote it, usually you get back into the story and you have the same problems you had if you had looked at it 2 months ago. Besides the amount of time that wastes, right? But if
because that's the other issue.
Apart,
is like, okay, now I have just a waiting period that I have to fill with other work to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and then then you still have to go back into that, right? But anyway, all that stuff aside, besides and we can just talk about it as a publishing delay, and we won't go down the road of what the state of publishing as it is right now, and as it's changing towards. But part of that is writing speed, right? It does matter. And if you want to do this for a living, if you want to do it for a hobby, which actually some people should, it's great. Then don't worry about what I'm saying right now. But except to say that that's also aggravating. Like you go back to your work and you're like, I can't see what I wanted to see, right? So instead, the way you get distance is you pull it apart and put it scene by scene on a Plottr timeline or whatever, and then you're looking at those objectively from a distance. So you just write what a summary of that scene is as you read through it the first time and put it on a plot line. And then when you go back and look at it, you can look objectively at that scene because it's no longer in context. You're not reading it. You're just reading a summary of what happened about that scene. And it's the same with a story that you really love. The problem with a story you really love is when you go searching for what worked, you get into the story again, right? Because it naturally traps you in and gets you, so you don't get that distance. If instead you go to that story, so I mean, some of my favorite episodes of Breaking Bad, I can't watch them and see what worked, but I can pull them apart scene by scene and see what worked. Because it gives me distance from the story. I'm no longer into the story. Instead, I'm into story analysis, and figuring out what was great, what was not great, what could have been done better. And then I translate that, hopefully, to how do I apply that to my own writing and the things that I do.
So do you mind if we go on a tangent for a second?
Sure, why not?
Okay, so you have 30 books out.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
How long have you been publishing?
So that's kind of a lot. Well, okay, it's not a long story. So really since about 2009 with any success.
Brilliant. Okay.
So I had been doing things before that, but I always wanted to be a writer. First of all, I had not made the decision. Like when you're going to be a full-time writer, you have to, at some point, you make the decision that this is it. Right. This is, and me. So the way I tell it is this, like I was in high school. I wrote my first book when I was 6 called George and the Giant Castle. And it has a plot. It's not great, but it exists. Right. Nobody's ever going to read it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But by the time I was 14, I knew I wanted to be a full-time writer. I mean, I knew being a writer was what I wanted to do with my life. But all of the experts, all of the school counselors, all the people around me,
right?
told me they told me I couldn't do it. And here's the thing:
absolutely,
they were the experts, so I believed them. So I tell people, 30 years of hairnets and name tags and various careers later, I decided I really need to figure this writing thing out, or I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the rest of my life because I'm not happy, and when I'm not writing, I'm not a good person. And I'm just not. Because
the opposite the opposite of creativity is rage, and that just makes so much sense to me.
Oh,
anyway, you saying like you're not a nice person.
What? Yeah,
I heard it via Rachel Rogers' podcast. And she was talking about research that Brené Brown did.
Yep. And I've heard
Mm-hmm.
this before. I mean, a creator who is not creating is a monster courting insanity. And
Huh.
It's not comfortable.
speaking from personal experience, I can tell you that that's true. Like
Yeah.
there was a very rough period of my life. It's a long story that I'm not gonna go deep into, but I mean, but we can on another podcast about mental health, but not on this one. But anyway,
Mm.
if you want
We
to,
love conversations about mental health here.
yeah,
So
We
yeah.
do.
if you want me to come back and talk about that, I can come back and talk about that another time. But I
Brilliant.
can tell you that, I was in a bad place. I was married to the wrong person for a few years of my life. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't write hardly at all. And when that period was over, I wrote an extremely long writing piece that there are only two people in the world have ever read it besides me. And nobody else is ever going to. But that writing was the therapy that snapped me out of that
Yeah.
period and propelled me to be able to recover. I also wrote a poem during that time, and I can't read it without getting emotional
Mm-hmm.
myself
Mm.
because the context was I was sitting around a campfire with a couple different people. Um, in this and in the midst of the situation, and they started talking through the scenario, and they're like, "Oh, you could probably just write a story about this right now." And in my mind, I was like, "Actually, I could." The scenario they were talking about, and
Mm-hmm.
I began to write it in my phone in the form of a poem. I didn't have any service. But I didn't have a notebook or anything, so I just wrote it in my phone at the time. And I've done very little to edit it, but it was very autobiographical at the time, and I can't make it through reading it without getting extremely emotional. Those two moments, that poem and the piece I wrote after all those bad things were over, literally saved my life.
Mm.
So what I can tell you, my whole reason for going off on that tangent and coming back to our current topic is to say that writing is a vital part of my life, regardless of whether I'm getting paid for it or not. My experience before I was writing all the time was that I was just never satisfied with anything else. There was
Mm.
no
Mm.
satisfaction that I found with anything else that I did with my life to the level that there's the satisfaction with the fact that I'm a writer. So when I do these things for like Plottr and I do book coaching and stuff like that, I don't do it for the money. Although, I mean, I need money. If you could see me, you could
Mm-hmm.
see I clearly like to eat, and my wife likes
Mm-hmm.
nice things. So, I have to make money, right? But I don't do it for the
Mm.
money. I do it
Yeah,
because
no,
I
I get you.
love writers, and I
Mm-hmm.
want them to not make the same mistakes I did when I was younger, and I want them to be successful. So I always say Plottr is a writing tool, right? This is a tool that's designed to help you write. So you can create the most beautiful Plottr file in the world, and that will make me extremely happy. I love beautiful Plottr files. You know what makes me happier is you show me the Plottr file, and then you show me the finished first draft you completed using that file. And now I'm happy because I know you're writing, and that's what really
Mm.
matters to me.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned using your phone to, jot something down when you don't have anything else. I do that a lot too. That's,
Mm-hmm.
when I'm going through that, that's pretty much the only way I write,
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I'm kind of like wondering, is Plottr like available as in like an app form? Because I do
Yes.
try to like outline in like Notepad, and it's never as
No.
organized as I want it to be.
So there's a Plottr iOS app, and there's also another option now. So there's two versions of Plottr. There's the desktop and the app version, right? But then there's a
Okay.
new version that's called Plottr Pro that's a web version, and you can access that anywhere you can access a browser, basically. And it also
Okay.
allows you to do some cool collaboration things, right? Um, but so I use that a lot on the go. Now, I tend to use my iPad because I have what I call experienced eyes, which basically means I'm old. And
Okay.
so I can't see. It's hard for me to actually plot with Plottr on my phone. I can do it, but it
It's
kind
just
of
the small.
aggravates me
Yeah.
because it's too
Mm-hmm.
small of a screen. Which is the same reason lots of things on my phone aggravate me. But I'm old, so I can complain about stuff, and everybody says, "Oh, that's normal." But anyway, but I love my iPad. I love doing it on my iPad.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, you can use whatever device Android tablets. I'm not an Android guy. I'm an Apple guy, but Android tablets, all those different things, you can use it on whatever. And the web version that you can now use, it used to be really difficult to use it on a Chromebook because of the operating system. But now with the Plottr Pro, you can use it on a Chromebook because, if you got access to the internet, you have access. So, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that mobile plotting, because for me, there are just times when I need to just jot something down or do something like make a change really quick. Or like when I'm traveling. So normally when I'm at home, I have two screens, no problem, right? When I'm traveling, I don't have two screens. I have my laptop. So I use my iPad as a second screen and look at my Plottr file on it. Whatever.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a workaround. And a lot of this stuff is like, I'll tell people some of these things are just my process. Like it's my workaround. And people be like, can I imitate your process? And I'm like, yeah, and it might actually work for you. It might not. I don't know. But you will find your own writing process that works for you. And usually, you will find a place that Plottr works into that writing process. It might not look like mine, but it will work for you. And that's really what's important, is that it works for you. It doesn't, whether that works for me or not. I mean, people have come up with some wacko ways they use Plottr. And I'm like, hey, that's great. I can't think like that. Like my brain explodes when you start talking about that stuff. But, it's good for you. If it keeps you writing, that's really all that matters.
Oh, it occurs to me, like, what it reminds me of. Are you familiar with the comic strip XKCD?
No.
No? Okay.
Only a little bit, and the only reason I say that is because I have a friend who occasionally sends me their comics because he is a big webcomic guy. And so he'll just send me ones he thinks that I think are funny. And usually I do think they're funny, but I don't go read it myself and find them. So.
Yeah, no, I do that with my dad too, and like my brother. It's usually like, oh, you would love this kind of thing.
Jokes, right?
My dad texts me math jokes like every day.
I love that. That's the cutest thing ever. Your dad. He's such a doll.
I know. But okay, so there was one XKCD strip because so Randall Munroe, who's the artist behind the webcomic, he does like so many different things. Like he touches on so many different topics, and one of the most impressive to me strips that he's done is he took Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, 12 Angry Men, Jurassic Park, and he mapped out every character in the movies or books and kind of mapped out the ways that they interact with each other over the course of the entire series or just the movie or the book. And I'll send you the link because visually it's so nice and it's just stunning. But as you go through it, you look at it and go, okay, that's that scene. I know because these guys are all clumped together now, and then we're introducing this character who's been all the way down at the bottom until now.
Ooh.
It's wonderful.
I love
and you're looking at the timelines. Really, I'm like, that's what this is, and I love it.
Oh wow,
that is so
I like
cool.
that.
Yeah, that made my brain tingle.
Yeah, that speaks to my nerd story structure self. Like I'm the kind of person that I will just dissect a story for no other reason than that it's there and I find it fascinating. And maybe that says something about me. I'm not sure what that is. Whatever it is, I'm comfortable with it. No,
I get you. Yeah. It's like when you're in school and you're learning about and your teacher's drawing the roller coaster, here's the action, the oh my god, what is the word?
The 3-act structure?
The 3-act structure. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And it's and here's the roller coaster, and here's where it goes up, and here's where the dramatic tension goes down. And you're like, I wish this was more complex so I could micromanage my plots a little better. This doesn't give me enough to work with.
Well, yeah, that's the shape of stories is they're all similar. Right? Mm-hmm. So if you look at story structure, the more you study story structure, like advanced story structures and stuff like that, the more you see that they're similar, but what's different about them is like the complexity and then the terminology, whether that terminology resonates with your genre or not. So, for example, like the Romancing the Beat story template, right? You guys, have you read the book? Do you like Romancing the Beat? Are you familiar with it?
Definitely.
Okay.
We're definitely
Guess what else? Guess what else Romancing the Beat works really well for?
Murder mysteries?
Thrillers.
I would think so.
Thrillers. Yeah. But to make it work, you have to change the terminology. So for me, I just translate, right? Because I'm a story structure nerd. I sit down with Romancing the Beat and I see exactly how that can translate to thrillers. Now, one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm developing a new template for Plottr that basically repurposes Romancing the Beat for thrillers. And I'm just going to call it like Thrilling the Beat or something like that. I don't know what I'm going to call it.
Okay, I love it.
And the reason is I'm just changing the language because the beats are the same. Right. Except we're not going to call it, just lost, whatever, Romancing the Beat thing, but we're not going to call it the same thing in a romance that we do in a thriller. Right. But the essential backbone behind it is identical. Right.
Yeah, no.
So
as you're saying this, I'm remembering every time that someone said, if you took this rom-com and like one of them was a serial killer, or just did it from like the other person's perspective, it would be a horror movie. And it's like, yeah, you're right.
Exactly. Well, and some of those,
really
like if you think about like this typical, let's take the typical Hallmark romance, Lifetime romance story, right? The girl goes to the country, she falls in love with her high school sweetheart in a small town, and her boyfriend from the big city, who's always made out to be an asshole and is in suits and stuff like that. That dude is the bad guy, and the guy in the flannel shirts driving the old pickup truck wins out, right? I mean, and he has a dog, and it's all wonderful, and it's love and light, and everybody sings Christmas carols at the end. But think about if that story was told from the perspective of the boyfriend in the city. His girlfriend goes to the country, meets somebody from her high school in a flannel shirt, and breaks up with him.
Yeah.
Okay. Different story, very different story. And all you have to do to make that a thriller or something like that is add some kind of psychotic or sociopathic tendency to that guy who goes after the dude in the flannel shirt, and you got a whole different story. You got a horror story or a thriller
that. All you do
or
is
whatever.
have to change the music that's playing in these moments.
Yeah.
And sometimes
and change the perspective.
It just flips everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to see that on Lifetime. I want to see the one on Lifetime where the guy from the city comes out, and it turns out, yeah, he wears the suit, but he's a black belt in Taekwondo because his dad was from Japan, and he kicks that guy's butt all over the place and hits him over the head with his axe, and then something.
Justice
I don't know.
For this guy.
Justice for the guy from the city
Justice
who lost
for
his
suits.
Who lost
Justice
his
for suit guy.
I mean, yeah.
I love it though.
He'd lost his girlfriend because she went home for Christmas. I mean, what a tragedy, But anyway.
Well, so and then there's also an argument to be made that like he's been blindsided by this too. Like, where was the communication between her and him and stuff like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, right. I mean, like it makes a good Danielle Steele book or a good Hallmark story, but the truth is, in real life, like some of the things that we accept in fiction, if those happened in real life, we would not be okay with it. Like, if you were if you were the best friend of that country girl and you were her best friend in the city who worked with her at whatever law firm she worked at, and she went home and suddenly came back to the city with a dude in flannel driving an old Chevy pickup truck, what would you do to your friends? You would be what
derailed all of your ambitions.
Are you in a cult?
Yeah. What is wrong with you? Like, what happened to you?
It's been 2 weeks.
Yeah,
life has changed.
Did you get hit on the head in the country? Did you fall over something? That's a dangerous place. Come back to the city where it's safe, right? I mean, you know what I mean? It becomes a whole different story. So it's just interesting to me that some of those things that we accept in like a tropey type story, we would never accept in our real lives. That would not be cool. It would not be acceptable at all.
No, that is kind of, I think, like that gets into its own tangent of like things you'll accept in fiction, but like in life are total red flags. Like I always see those TikToks and I'm like, yeah, but I'm gonna keep reading it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes, because that is very true. Like there are some things that in your life would be a total red flag. I'd be like, one of those things of the tri-fails that happen in a lot of those romances. One of those things happened when I was dating a chick and I'd be like, nope, I'm out. There'd be like,
Well,
no
and I think
way. Like delete her number, block on social media. I'm done. Right?
It kind of works the opposite way too, though. There's like, because things need to be tied up kind of neatly in a story in a way that in real life they aren't. So like I've, because I look at everything in this story analytical kind of way, like looking for the beats in things, sometimes in real life I'm like, oh, if this was the moment in like a Hallmark movie, we would have to break up right now because like the story just demands it. But then it's like, actually in real life, I think we could talk this out and like get to a better place and like have some nuance,
Well, unless it's only been 2 weeks. See, that's part of the thing.
Unless it's only been 2 weeks.
The relationships mature like really quickly. And I'm like, I don't know that happens as much in real life and I mean, I understand we're under the constraints of a movie that happens in a relatively short period of time. So we're suspending our disbelief for a little bit. And the truth is, so this is another thing that writers often get hung up on, and it kind of goes back to actually talking about plot, is the fact that they get hung up on creating this perfect story, right? That everything works, right? Mm-hmm. But then I go, well, okay, you created this story with this thriller where all the elements are really true to real life, right? And then I'm like, have you seen John Wick?
Yeah. It needs to be like a little out there. Otherwise, it's just real life.
I send them the YouTube link. There's a guy that's like, he's a bone specialist or some kind of doctor, right? And he goes through John Wick and talks about every single bone in the body based on John Wick because he gets hit everywhere, right? So it just explains the whole skeletal anatomy using John Wick as, the movie John Wick. It's hilarious. It's so hilarious.
That's amazing.
Because it's like, if you think about that, like how do we suspend our disbelief for Die Hard, John Wick, all those different things? As writers, we're perfectly comfortable with watching them. Everything's okay. Until it comes to our own writing, and then we're like, well, it never would really work like that. I'm like, who cares? Like, there's many of these books, Jack Reacher, The Gray Man by Mark Greaney, all those books are based on the fact that there is no way a normal person could survive that. But like, we believe that person can survive it because, they get shot in the shoulder and they're back in action the next day. And I'm like, no, you wouldn't be. You'd be on your couch on drugs. I promise you would be, There's just no way.
I think...
did either of you guys watch the most recent season of Stranger Things?
Yes.
Okay, I was throwing a fit when Hobbs is barefoot in the snow for like a day. He's barefoot in the snow.
Yeah, no, he would be losing those toes.
Yeah.
And he would have no skin left on his feet. Oh, for sure. Like, that would be a Blackfoot. And he just, like, goes in and he gets peanut butter first. I'm like, dude, you can't walk right now. Like, are you kidding me? No, it was definitely one of those things where I'm like, they are making me suspend my reality too far right now. Like, I have felt snow. That's too cold. Like, give him a boot. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever gone out for this?
Oh, go ahead. I was in the Army in Fort Hood, Texas, and this friend of mine just got wet boots, and we didn't have a real great way to dry out, right? And he ended up with nerve damage in his feet from frostbite.
No. Oh my God.
And the guy couldn't run anymore because there were days when he just couldn't feel his feet, and he wouldn't know it until he started to run, and then would just fall over, right? And so when I was watching, I was the same way. I'm like, oh yeah, no, dude's got frostbite already, and he's got permanent nerve damage. Even if he recovers, even if he doesn't lose his toes, he's got permanent nerve damage that's never going to correct. Like, it's never coming back. And then he just goes on
with the rest of the season being a bad A. Like,
no,
of course,
can't do that.
No, I don't. I'm sorry, guys. You pushed it too far. Like,
it's so hard to
the
find,
mind
like,
bending
that
of
line.
11, I'm fine. But
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and
No.
this is the thing, like, you look at, like, Die Hard, right? And they shoot all the glass out, and then here comes John McClane running over all this broken
barefoot.
glass.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if you have ever, like, gotten
Whew.
one piece of
I know,
broken
it hurts
glass
so bad.
in your foot, like, it hurts so bad.
So
like, you can't even, like, because your feet are so freaking, I mean, you stub your toe on the corner of your bedpost,
so bad.
and you are like, you stub your toe one time, and you're like limping, and you would think that you like had just, you know, torn your leg off or something.
Yeah,
right?
this is the
so
end of my
painful.
life as I knew it. Yeah.
This is the end. It's all. I see the light. Should I go to the light? No.
I would rather die than live through this.
Yeah, than live through this incredible pain, right? And it does go away. Like, it subsides and goes away. But, like, in that moment, you're not continuing to run with a pistol in your hand and leaning backwards and shooting people and actually hitting them. Like, it just doesn't happen. Like, just crazy.
I mean, but that is the excitement. And, like, that's part of, like, the promise, because we talk a lot about, like, the promise that you make to your readers, but, like, as a thriller writer, that scene is part of the promise that you make to your readers. That's one of the reasons why they came to your book.
Well, yes. So see, this is funny. This is funny because I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Is it's a magic system. So, like, when you create a fantasy, you create a magic system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, yes.
And within that magic system,
I'm totally
as long as you follow your own rules, it's fine, right? Thrillers are the same. We set up from the beginning that this guy is almost invincible, right? That he's going to experience pain, he's going to experience hardship, but he's going to keep going through all of that because his motivation is strong enough. He's not even going to feel the pain of that shot through his shoulder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we fulfill that promise by letting him be invincible, and then our readers come along with us and believe us because we never break our own rules. So it's a magic system. It's just in a thriller or a police whatever, or John Wick or whatever the case may be. But it's just, we haven't broken our own rules. We've set our own magic system and set the boundaries for our own world, and we're letting people come along with us. It's a beautiful thing. Really.
I really love that. Setting your own rules for the world as like not just a fantasy thing.
Yeah. I mean, and so, I mean, one of the things that writers make a mistake of is they don't do this in the first draft, right? To bring it back to plotting, right? And so they need to, because there are times when creativity needs structure to be understood by other people, right? And creativity needs structure. And people don't like to hear that sometimes. And I'm sorry they don't like to hear it, but it doesn't change like the fact that that's what it is, right? So yeah.
When it's like anything else, it can be inserted on the tail end, but that is going to be something you have to do because you can't rely on everybody seeing your brain. Like, you have to put it clearly enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the other balance, is trusting the reader to have an imagination and to come along with you, but at the same time to give their imagination something to work with. So it's kind of like I tell people, okay, if you have a thriller, you don't have to describe a cheap hotel room to us. Most of us have seen a cheap hotel room. There's not a huge amount of description that's needed there. If you're creating a fantasy and you created a forest with purple trees, well, I need some info, man. I need to know what's going on here. There's purple trees and fairies and dragons. Okay, that's a little more world building, right? But at the same time with a thriller, if you're going to have somebody who appears to be an ordinary person, has these extraordinary abilities, you have to have some setup for that somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's really interesting. You were talking extraordinary abilities. Love Actually, the little redheaded kid. There was a whole storyline written in that got removed, that he was actually like this incredible gymnast, so that they could have, like, in the chase scene at the end, they could have like really cool gymnastic feats and like stuff like that.
Oh my god.
Yeah, but it ended up being too dense.
Yeah,
right?
no, I think that it's good that it got cut because
I completely agree with it getting cut. Like, this kid already learned how to play the drums at a professional level in like 3 weeks.
Like a 9-year-old or whatever to accomplish.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just interesting, like, that to have the end result that they wanted with all the gymnastics and like all of that, they would have to build it into the story before.
Yeah.
And I agree. Ultimately, it was the right choice to remove. But yeah, it's just interesting.
Yeah. It is interesting, and it's also like the lesson we can take away as storytellers is that really there are moments when you need to kill. I mean, that was somebody's darling in the writing room.
Yeah, I was gonna say kill that darling. Yeah.
Somebody in the writing room was like, "This is awesome. Like, we need to have this in here," and somebody overrode them and killed it. Some editor or something like that, right? And it was the right call. And so a lot of times as storytellers, we need to be willing to, and this comes back to getting that distance from your story and looking at it and going, you know, the story, like, I just edited a manuscript last year where the guy started, the original manuscript he sent me was 155,000 word horror story.
Oof.
Okay.
That's a
hefty.
little long for horror, like twice as long.
Yeah.
He had 2 books there, right? So we simplified and took out of some of these weird little subplots and stuff that he had, and we ended up with 72,000 words by the time we were done.
That's a decent
right? But the reason is he had to be willing to say, I know you love this subplot, right? But this subplot is another novel all by itself.
Mm-hmm.
We can't have 2 novels in the one novel, not if you want to sell this, because it turns out to be phone book length if you print it. And nobody wants to read the phone book for horror.
No, and even
right?
so
it doesn't work.
So I know every episode I talk about how much I love Tessa Dare books. I'm gonna do it again. Just, like get it in there. It's a quota. I'm fulfilling a quota here.
There you go.
I'm not paid by Tessa Dare. Just a disclaimer.
Maybe you should be. Maybe you should be.
Maybe I will email her about that.
I think that you would just be happy with Tessa saying hi. Like, I think at this point you're like, okay.
But so I went, I have most of her books. At one point I was like, I would like to have all of her books. And so I went searching and digging for her most early, the things she wrote at the very beginning of her career. And so I got one of the books and I read it, and it was, so it's a Regency. And so at some point it goes through all the beats, but then you're halfway through the book and it's like, no, we could end here and this would be fine. Like, it goes through the whole process of these 2 getting engaged and then they get married, and you're like, so the love story ends here, right? But then, and like, they're happy. So you definitely think it's going to end there. And then they have a fight, and then they start the entire next, like, a whole nother love story starts over of them being mad at each other and then figuring out how to love each other in these new circumstances. But that's a whole nother book right there. And I'm like, you could have cut this in half.
Yeah.
And you could have had 2 books, Tessa.
Yeah. It could have been a happy for now. Yeah.
Or, like, you could have cut it in half and just changed their names, and, like, that was a fine starting point. Like, you could, I don't want to rant about it, but, like, it was such a weird feeling reading that book, because I was like,
that is interesting.
I'm confused as a reader, because the emotional arcs it puts you through, it's like, it finished, but we're still going.
What I love about that, though, is, like, Tessa has done so well at learning her craft, honing her craft, and now, like, writes, like, I mean, books that are really, like, precise. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's doing a really good job. And so, like, that's really comforting to me in, like, my stage where I'm at in my manuscript.
Yes.
But, like, it's okay, just do it. It's fine, just keep writing. Like, it's okay, like.
Well, yeah, and besides,
there's
so if
growth
you think about
anyway.
this, besides the muddle in the middle that everybody talks about, right, which is that tough to write middle of the book, the truth of the matter is, though, many authors don't know where to start their book or where to end it. Like, especially when you're new.
I'm hitting a lot now.
So like when you're new, the thing is you spend 2 chapters getting into the story yourself and telling yourself the story. And I'm like, so 90% of the time when you're a new writer, cut those first 2 chapters. Because if you look at it, like if you put it on a plot line and look at it, what happens,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, where's your inciting incident? Well, your inciting incident is about halfway through the book. Because
Mm.
you told all this story and all this backstory, and quite honestly, the reader doesn't need to know any of that to know this story that you're telling, right? They have
Mm-hmm.
no idea, right? So they don't need to know that. So cut it out. The other part is the ending. As an author, we want to wrap everything up, and you should to an extent, wrap everything up, right?
Mm.
But not
Mm-hmm.
100%, not so much. There's nothing for the reader to even suppose
Imagine.
about. Because then,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, you have no hope for a series because you've written the next part of the series into the end of the book, right? There's nothing for the readers to go on to. And also, if you think about real life, like the happily for now, when you get engaged, right? When you
Mm.
start wedding planning, that's a whole new book.
Yeah.
Because honestly, you're going to have problems during the wedding planning stage. If you don't, God, you're miracle workers, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
you eloped. You just eloped and got it over with, right? Um,
Well, so that
I
was
mean, but that
what
has
was
its
the
own
name of that
problems.
movie?
oh yeah, then that
Yeah.
launches your life in a different way, though.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about that, if you let's say you elope, you just go off and elope or whatever, then your married life starts in a different way than if you had that wedding
Mm-hmm.
planning and that big wedding, right? So it's
Yep.
still another book, right? So we could argue that when the couple gets back together the second time or whatever, that usually the romance plot is they separate, something separates them, yada yada, whether that's physically or emotionally or whatever, and then they get back together in the end. After that get back together in the end, there's the climax, there's your end of the story, right? Well, if
Mm-hmm.
you look at the typical romance beats and the typical romance story structures, that's where they end. The temptation is for writers to go, oh, that was a try fail, and then they add a whole other part of the book on which doesn't need to be there, you know.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
No,
just
that's
interesting.
definitely. I think definitely one of like the number one memes that I see people like, when they discuss romance novels, they're like, all right, I'm 90% of the way in and they haven't kissed yet. It's
Yeah,
something like that. It's
Mm-hmm.
like they've spent so much time not really getting well paced through the romance beats and kind of like hitting those kind of emotional moments that
yeah.
need to happen, in that roller coaster.
Well, yeah, exactly. And sometimes we're just like, do it already. I mean, I
It's
mean,
like I've waited this long. You're
like,
not gonna make me wait another 50 pages.
yeah, I'm like, you're gonna make me another 50 pages for this, and it's like, oh my goodness, imagine the characters; they must be tortured at this point.
Yeah,
I'm like,
Mm.
exactly.
just get it over with, at least, whatever the case may. Anyway, whatever. And
Well, but
if you're
like as
writing,
long as you've set up their no way well enough,
Mm.
then like that tension works. But
yeah,
it's really relying on the fact that you've set up the no way
which people
to
don't.
carry enough weight.
That's the thing is
Yeah.
people don't set it up enough
Yeah.
because they don't realize like this is that might have worked for a 1950s, maybe a 1970s novel, right? Depending upon the
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
cleanness of your romance genre or whatever. But in the modern world, that just doesn't work that well.
Exactly.
In modern
Mm-hmm.
romance, I think that's part of it too. Is like I always tell people to like read in your genre, right? But I've
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
revised that now. I've said
Mm.
you need to consume stories in your genre, which can include watching TV, listening to audiobooks,
Mm-hmm.
whatever happens to be your particular poison, right? Of consuming story. Because what really matters is consuming that story structure. It doesn't matter how you do it, you
But
know.
I would even caveat
Yeah.
that to be books written in the past, like published or like media published in the past like 5 years.
Yeah.
Like
Mm.
because trends change. Like you said, like that might
Yes.
have worked back in the 70s, but we are not writing a 1970s book here.
I
Yes.
think that's
And
especially important, especially if you're looking to be especially traditionally published, but I will also kind of say it's important if you're self-publishing,
mm-hmm.
Where you see.
Self-publishing, indie publishing is just as important or more important because you are not only, you're the conduit to your readers, right?
Yeah, you're not insulated in any way.
And you don't have a brand behind you like Random House. You are your own brand, right? And so it's super important that you stay true to your own brand. This is why, like, my romantic comedy serial killer series that's coming out at the beginning of the year will have a slight variation of my name as a pen name, right? Because I don't want people coming to it expecting my serious thrillers, and all of a sudden we're laughing about somebody not liking the guy's appetizers at a cannibal fest, right? There's a certain amount of crossover, right? There's a certain amount of crossover, but there's also a certain amount of crossover that's not going to happen, right? Because that's a different brand than what I'm doing now.
Yeah, no,
right?
Absolutely.
Different brand.
It's so important.
So as indie publishers, I would say that your quality and that you're meeting those tropes and that formula and stuff like that is, if anything, more important than if you're traditionally published. Or at least on a par with it. At least on a par.
I think also we are kind of graded on a tougher scale. Because people will take a traditionally published book and be like, oh, these are the experts. And they'll accept that for what it is.
It comes with like more
integrity is packaged into the book.
Yeah, like it's got other people's backing behind it.
Exactly. Whereas indie publishers, you make a mistake, like one single mistake, and we can find mistakes in traditionally published books as well. But as indie publishers,
you're that one mistake, small things, you know.
Exactly. And you indie published because you couldn't find a traditional publisher is like the mentality still in the market.
Yeah. Now that is shifting though. That is changing and shifting though. It is a slow shift, but there are an increasing number of people who don't even look at who the publisher is necessarily. The other aspect of that though is well, and this goes off on a complete tangent, but the other aspect of that is how you price and how you market your books. I can spot a lot of indie published books in the top 100 on Amazon or whatever the case may be by the price of the book.
Okay, interesting.
Because what's interesting is you go, if I price my books, which I haven't raised my prices as much as I probably should, but I did raise them last year. And I should probably raise them again because to match what's in my genre. But you just go look at your genre and say, if Lee Child is getting $7.99 for an ebook, there's no reason you can't get $7.99 for an ebook, right? And you look more traditionally published if your ebooks cost more. And so it's kind of weird, but people perceive the value by how you price your books. So when you price a book at 99 cents, what happens is a lot of people will buy it on sale, but you don't get as many reads as if, like, my first in series of one of my series is $1.99, not $99, and I sell more at $1.99 than I did at $99.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And I get more reviews, more organic reviews out of those too. And it's not because the plotting's any different or the story's any different. It's because the perceived value is there. And so if you make it so that your covers look like traditionally published covers, if your blurbs look like traditional blurbs, if your prices look like traditionally published prices, nobody can tell the difference between you and the traditionally published people. What happens is indie authors tend to skimp on certain things at times, create their own covers, not get a lot of feedback on their blurbs, different things like that. And so they tend to, you tend to have, the failing is not in the market. The failing is in us as indie authors embracing the things we need to do to make ourselves fit into the market. And so that's it. I mean, I think if you're doing things correctly, it should be very difficult for someone to tell that you're an indie published author. Sometimes I can tell just by the cover. I can go, oh, the author created their own cover. And people are like, how can you spot that? And I'm like, because I am not a graphic designer and a cover maker, but I have a cover designer. And I look at other people's covers all the time. And I can tell a lot of times, unless you have really studied, there are some people that can create great covers of their own covers, but they have usually worked at that.
Kate's horn here.
Yeah.
So,
They have usually
Kate,
worked pretty hard at that,
Well,
right?
Kate is a graphic designer, like, for her
Yes,
work
that is
too.
my day
Yeah.
job.
Oh, well,
So,
yeah.
And
I
before
mean,
like
this,
her,
I did. Oh, you go.
no, like Kate does illustrated covers, and
ooh,
also her own Photoshop covers too. You should check out her covers and mine because she did them. So
oh.
she does an amazing job. She's
Well, I
very
might
good.
have to talk to Kate about a couple illustrated covers for my one series because the stock covers don't work really well. But
Hmm.
I wrote
Mm.
a certain romantic comedy under a pen name, and I just
Mm.
literally slapped kind of I had my cover designer do this cover that I'm not like exceptionally happy with, but I was like, whatever. It works, right? And this book
Mm.
keeps selling, so I really need to concentrate on it and like actually make it a better cover and stuff like that. But I
Hmm.
just didn't do it initially because I wrote the book on a dare and then I threw it out there thinking, whatever. And every conference that I go to, every book signing thing that I go to, I sell out of that book before I sell on any of my others.
That's
But
Huh.
anyway,
fantastic. What was the dare?
what was the dare? Okay. That's a long story, but we got a little bit of time. We're already over time, so whatever, but, so, oh man, Siri's listening to what I'm saying too. What the hell? Anyway, uh, so, so what happened is 2019, December of 2019, I was trying to come up with a challenge for myself for 2020. And a friend of mine had already challenged me to a short story challenge of writing 52 short stories in 2020, one a week, right?
Oh
All of them
wow.
had to be
Okay.
2,000 words long, that type of thing, right? So me being who I
Okay.
Mm.
am, I'm thinking commercially, like how can I sell these,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
So I'm like, I'm going to write them all in the same world. I'm going to write all these stories, right? And so December 2019,
Love
before
that.
any of us knew what 2020 was going to be,
Uh-huh.
I put out this stupid post on Facebook, one of the stupidest decisions I ever made. And I'm like, I'm going to write 1,000,000 words in 2020. Who wants to join me? And I'm thinking, no one is going to join me because they're going to realize how insane I am,
Yeah,
right?
no, my brain just hurts.
And so they're like, I'm
Like,
not going to do it, right? But 40 people joined my Facebook group to write
wow.
1,000,000 words in 2020, right? 40 people. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Did you guys not understand the number? There was an extra zero there. You see the extra zero? Um, but anyway, so I'm like, oh, whatever, here goes, right? Um, and so, but then 2020 turned into what it was. Well, certain writer friends of mine, they froze. Like 2020, they went, the world is a mess and I
Hmm.
cannot write. And
Yeah.
I completely understood that,
Yeah,
except that
that's
my
fair.
default was,
To
oh,
write
the
more.
world is really shit. So my escape
Yeah,
is to go into writing.
that
Like
was
that's
mine
my
too.
escape. I escape into writing. So by November, mind you, I was over 1,000,000 words already.
Wow.
Wow.
So, which
Holy
means I have tons
smokes.
of material, some of it good, some of it not so good to do things with, right? I've been going through that over the past few years. But so it comes time for Nano, and a friend of mine messages me and says, "Hey, are you going to do Nano this year?" And I just started
Hell no.
laughing. I'm like, what? Like, have you been following my year? Like, I have written over 1,000,000 words. Why am I going to do Nano? But during that time, I have been doing some webinars for Plottr for romance writers. I
Mm.
decided I need to come up with this crazy story idea that's funny to do a demo for romance writers. So I came up with the Call of Karen. And it was basically where Karen and Cthulhu, Internet Karen and
Oh
Cthulhu
my
meet
god. I
and they
love
fall
it.
in love and they go on an adventure together, right?
Oh
And
my
it's just
god.
an action adventure romance, right?
Oh, that's so
Call it
fun.
Call of Karen. And so she was like, I was like, I don't have anything to write for November. Oh, but wait, I do. And she goes, I dare you to write that book for November. Because everybody
That
that
is
heard
so
that
fun.
romance thing, that webinar said, if you write that book, I would read it. And I went, I'm not going to write that book. I mean, this is exactly what I said all of 2020. I'm not going to write that book. It was the stupidest book on the planet. Why would I write that book? I'm not going to write that book. And then November came around, and I wrote that book, right? So the
I
next
love
year,
it.
like I had it edited and all that kind of stuff. And the next year, I literally just threw it out there under a pen name. And I'm like, I don't even care what happens to this book. It was written on a dare. It's funny, but people either find it or they won't. And I'd put it on Kindle
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Vella first as episodes. And then after it had been on there for a while, I put it out there as a book, right? Um, and all of a sudden, like people are like, it's selling. And I'm like, why is this stupid book selling? And then people would come to conferences and stuff, and the opening of the prologue is hilarious. And so I would tell people at the conference, I'd be like, read the first page of that. It'll tell you what the rest of the book is all about. And I would just turn away, whatever. And they'd read the first page and they would buy it. Then they would bring their friends back who would buy it too. And it was
That's
like
so
incredible, right? And so this year in November, I wrote the sequel to it. So, anyway, that's what I did for Nano this year. But that's how that book came about. Like, I wrote it on a dare and was like, whatever, I didn't care what happened to it. So, it was kind of fun to let my muse just play, but at the same time, I was like, well, maybe now that it's actually selling and I wrote a sequel, I should take it seriously enough to put a decent cover on it. But anyway, so I may have to talk with you about that. Because you need to illustrate Cthulhu and Karen. So.
Yeah, and they've got to be in the throes of passion, of course.
In the throes of passion.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Kind of the storm.
Because my one friend was like, so she goes, I'm not sure I want to read this because what happens when they kiss? Like, how does that work? And I'm like, oh, you just have to read it to find out. And she was like, I don't know if I want to read that and find out. I'm like, well, you should. It's funny. I promise it's funny. But anyway, so
that is a delight. I love it.
Yeah, it was a blast. But anyway, because sometimes as writers, we just have to let our muse play, right? Just let our muse do what it wants. Because this job, okay, going back to Plottr, one of the things that Plottr does for you is it makes this job more fun, right? You have less pain in this job because I tell people constantly, this job of writing full time is the hardest job that you will ever have in your life. There are easier ways to make money, right? If you want to just make money, there's easier ways to make money. But so the writing part might as well be fun because this is hard, right? I'm not going to tell you that this is easy or that at some point it gets any easier, that you've written 30 novels and now your life is just wonderful. I go, no, it doesn't really work that way either. And I wish I could tell you some kind of happy story that it does, but you still struggle. You still have those days when you want to quit. You still have imposter syndrome, whatever the case may be. So you need to make this as fun as possible. So sometimes you need to just go and let your muse play and do whatever it wants to do and not worry about whether it's commercially viable or not, or whether you can sell it or whatever. And then just worry about that part later. So, yeah. Anyway.
That is such a challenge, though.
Yeah.
To, like, not edit while writing and...
Yeah.
Or, like, more knowledge just creates more challenge with that.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. That's the other thing about it is... The other thing is, the more knowledge you get and the better you get at this, the higher your expectations are for yourself. Right? So forget other people's expectations, which are already bad enough, but you add your own expectations on top of that. It really is challenging. And I mean, listen, I always tell people too, this is the most amazing and the most awful job you could ever have. And I love it. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Like I wouldn't, but I just tell people, if you're going to do this full time as a living, seriously consider like, what that means to you and your life, because it is dramatic. It is different than what you expect it to be. It really is. So just be prepared for that. Like I said, I love it. I wouldn't change it, but I mean, it is difficult. It is difficult. So anyway.
One of my favorite quotes, and I did not hear it directly from the person who gave it. Like I heard it via a podcast because that's how I collect all of my information.
As our listeners do too.
Exactly. Thanks, listener. But so the quote was that this prolific author was asked at a conference, like, what's the best book you've ever written? And their answer was, I haven't written it yet. And, like, it's just this idea that every single book is better.
Yeah.
And that, there's just growth in every single page you write. And that's really cool. But I also try to remind myself, like, it's just words. Like, they can all be erased. They can all be moved around. It's just words.
Yep,
just
exactly.
Write the words.
Well, and I will tell you, the last book that I wrote is the one I'm the proudest of. But I think that the next book in this series will be better, quite honestly. And I mean, I certainly hope so. certainly hope that I've learned something that I move along as I go along, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, but I mean, I think that's a very awesome quote, and it's also just really important for no matter what stage of writer you're at, whether you're just starting out as your very first book, or whether you're, 15, 20 books in, you can always refine and change your process. You can always grow. I just never stop learning in this industry, and I
Mm-hmm.
just don't ever think that I will stop
Mm-hmm.
learning. I think if I stopped learning, I'd be going backwards. And it's just,
Yeah.
there's just so much. You're never going to master writing so much to the point that you just feel like I don't need to learn anything anymore. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and if anybody listening has gotten to that point, please email me because I want to know how you did it. Um, and in some ways, in other ways, I don't. Like, I don't really want to stop learning. I mean, this is just one of
Mm-hmm.
my favorite this is just one of my favorite things on the planet to do, and I just don't know. Um, I mean, I don't know what my life would be like without this. I don't know. Um, all the different things that I do, all of them serve the exact same purpose. And that's just this is just my passion. And you probably figured that out. I mean, we've been
Yeah.
talking for well over an hour. And you probably figured that out by now, that this is just, you know, whether it's Plottr or whether it's just writing related or story structure related, these are just my passions. It's just what I
Mm-hmm.
live for and what I do. And my God, I wouldn't change any of it if you know, eh, there's just none of it that I would change. But you're going to be learning forever and ever in this
Mm-hmm.
process, and
I
give
love that.
yourself the tools and first of all, give yourself the tools to learn. Don't ever take those away from yourself. And second of all, give yourself permission to fail and give yourself permission to learn from it. And that's going to be some of
Hmm.
the number one things you can do.
That's
It,
really good advice.
it's, it's, it's been my life. And like I say, there's things about it that I wouldn't trade for anything. So, yeah.
So, is there anything that you'd like to share about Plotter that we haven't covered, or that you wanted to go deeper into?
Um, well, kind of my final thoughts on it is this, and I tell people this all the time. I'm like, basically, go and start playing with it and figure out if and how it works for you, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
30-day free trial. Also, the software is super cheap when it comes to writing tools, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I
So
noticed that too.
start at the most basic level and learn from there. And I typically end with something like this. Like, we have a YouTube channel where I've interviewed tons of different writers about how they use Plottr. It's called Thursdays with Troy. It came out on Thursdays a lot of the time, not always consistently, but it came out on Thursdays, and it was hosted by a guy named Troy. So really got creative with the name there. You guys can probably figure that out, right? But the thing that happens every time in those videos is this. The author says, I start with this plot structure, or I start with this in Plottr, or whatever it is that we're talking about, and then. The words "and then" are the most important thing that they say during that whole interview. Because after that comes the part where they tell me how they personalized Plottr to work for them. So I
Hmm.
tell people, when they start using Plottr, to find your "and then." This is what the whole goal is. Find your "and then" and find out how you can make this tool work as a part of your process and the way that you work. But if you just go into any tool, any writing tool that you go in, or any writing technique or writing story structure, writing book that you go into, find your own "and then." That is the most important thing you can do throughout your entire writing career, is find your next "and then." Personalize things, make them work for you. This is your journey, nobody else's.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I do
Um,
feel like a lot of softwares, when you try them out, it's that you end up feeling like you're boxed in and you have to work with it the way that it wants you to do your work.
what I
You know?
find a lot of times is like I get these like Scrivener is a great example. Like it can do so much more than what I use it for. Right? Like I use
Mm.
like 10% of this program. And like, I find that I get intimidated by too much function. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like Excel.
Feature overload. Feature overload,
yeah, exactly.
which is, and this is what I tell people, like, I used to use Scrivener, like a lot of the features of Scrivener, I have cut way back because I have Plottr, because I've developed a different process. It's actually changed my process. But I tell people this too, because a feature is there doesn't mean you have to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are advanced features in Plottr that there are some things that certain people just never use them. And that's actually fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Just because it's there doesn't mean you have to use it, right? So relax, go in there, play around with things, keep it simple at first, and move towards more complex, and find your own way. This is just, I mean, this will be the mantra of your entire writing career, is find your own way. It's your journey, it's your path. Find what works for you.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right. So where can people find you?
Kate, are you eliminating our end of
podcast? Slowly trying to phase that out.
So this was Kate's idea, Troy.
I'm going to scrap my own ideas.
Yeah, you got your own agenda.
She wanted to have like a tradition at the end of each like episode, and so she's like, we give a piece of writing advice, right?
Like whatever you are constantly, like not constantly, currently,
but like what you're working on,
writing.
And you can choose to not give any if you'd like, or repeat something you've already said, because you've had some really great golden nuggets in here. But yeah, so if you'd like to share a piece of writing advice, if you want Kate or I to go first, neither of us ever come with one in the pocket. So.
No, empty brain currently.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, okay, so before we get to that, I'll just say basically, look, you can find Plottr at plottr.com, Plottr.com.
Okay,
leave out the E. You can find it there. And we have tons of support if you're looking for support and if you need help. You can reach out to me directly and contact me. I tell people, if you can't find me, try Google. If Google doesn't work to find me, your internet is down.
It works
to go
great.
check with your provider, if and then figure that out from there. But I will let you guys go
also in the show notes.
Well, yes, and I will let you guys go first with writing advice, and I will save mine until the end.
Okay.
Mine is be comfortable. Like, have a blanket on your lap and have a drink and somewhere that you feel comfortable physically writing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not like a vibes kind of be comfortable, like a physically comfortable.
Yeah. Do you want to take vibes, Kate? Is that what you're going to do?
No, I really liked what you said, Troy, about allow yourself to fail.
I love that one.
I think I always kind of keep close to my heart the idea of allow yourself to write a bad first draft, and I try so hard not to do that anyway, and I'm like, trying to stick to that. But then, the kind of second part to me is you're always gonna make it better after the bad first draft. But
and I have go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I like the idea of allow yourself to fail sometimes, because failure is natural, and I hadn't really thought of it that way in quite a bit, so it's nice to be reminded of that, and just let that take pressure off you.
I'm going to build on that too, because the moments that you take the risk in the manuscript and you're like, I'm going too big, I'm going too big, I'm going too big, but you do it anyway and it lands, those are the moments that actually really excite the reader and really make them connect. And so if you never take those risks, then you haven't created the color that could have been there.
I like that.
Very true. Very true. That's very good. And I'm actually just going to build off of that and say that No, because this is super interesting, because one of the advice I give people is don't fall into the trap of plot procrastination. And what I mean
Mm-hmm.
by
Okay.
that is that you're over plotting your novel. And the reason 99% of the time, maybe 95% of the time, but a large majority of the time, the reason people fall into this trap is because they're afraid. This is a
Mm-hmm.
passion project for
Mm.
them. They love this book. They think this is going to be the best thing they've ever written. And they keep planning it over and over again because they're terrified
Mm-hmm.
to start. Okay. My thing is going to be, I'm not going to tell you not to be afraid. I'm going to tell you to take the risk and start anyway, because there is nothing greater than that finished first draft of your passion project. Give yourself permission to not be afraid. Give yourself the permission to move forward and to write that draft as hard as it might be for you, because it's going to be the best thing you've written so far.
I love that.
Aw. All right.
That's really warm.
You
Troy,
do you have like a Facebook group you want people to find you at, or like
your
um,
socials.
social medias that you like
yeah,
to?
you can find me, and you can find me on Facebook. I think my Facebook page is Author Troy or something like that. Or you can find me in the Plottr group. You can be friends with me on Facebook if you want. You can chase me on Instagram, um, Twitter. I'm still hanging in there. Who knows what'll happen over there?
I
But
know, right?
hey,
We are too,
Mm.
but like, really,
it's
what is happening?
it's kind of fun to
Yeah,
watch the dumpster fire, if you know what I
It
mean.
is.
it
It's kind of like an
is. Like,
accident that's hard to turn away from. And you can find me on TikTok from time to time. A friend of mine and I are doing a poetry challenge. We did it last year, and we're
Oh,
doing it again
lovely.
this year, where we're writing a poem every day in December. So there's some TikToks out there with some poems, some of my poems on there. And they're super fun because we really challenge each other with different words every day and then have to write a poem, and we
I
deal them
love
out of this
that.
we have a deck of cards that's called Poetry Poker, and it's just there's a bunch of different decks that we have, and they all have different words on them, and sometimes we'll deal one word, sometimes we'll deal three, and you have to figure it out. So come find me on the socials, follow that around. I wouldn't say that I'm one of the greatest poets of our time, but I enjoy the heck out of writing poetry from time to time, and this just happens to be the time of the year that we do a lot of it. So come and
I
join
really
me,
love
find me. Yeah.
how you gamify your writing.
Oh yeah.
Like, I really love that.
Mine as well.
Yeah.
mm.
You
I
do
mean,
enough of it.
I, I mean, it kind of goes back to that having fun thing. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
and same thing on social media. Like, I might not see you right away or whatever. I'm in and out of there, random, whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
But I mean, this whole writing, like I say, this whole writing life thing has to be fun. So hey, come join me. Let's have some fun.
Do you have a newsletter and all that?
Yep, I have a newsletter and all that. You can sign up at my website at troylambertwrites.com. You can sign up for the Plottr one at plottr.com, oddly enough. Yeah, but I have a newsletter. I have a newsletter that's for writers as well, that you can kind of join. Or you can join my regular one too, and then see all the books that I have coming out. This year is going to be a busy one. There's going to be lots of stuff
Ooh,
coming out this
all
year.
right.
So,
Yay! I love that.
all
So,
right.
I'm
Kate,
looking forward to reading Call of Karen because I'm gonna now.
You'll be able to find it easy enough. I don't think there's a lot of books titled Call of Karen on Amazon. I think it's pretty
I'm
unique.
very excited.
All
um,
right,
Kate, you want to tell them where
Marty.
you're at?
Oh, okay. I was gonna tell you to tell them where you're at, but okay.
No, you first, Kate. You
No, no.
first.
All right. I'm by Kate Pryor. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, for as long as Twitter's there, and yeah, pretty much anywhere there's a social. That's my name there.
I am at Marty V Author on TikTok, Twitter, the Insta, and then also martyv.com. And listener, you're just the cutest. Thank you for being here.
Yes, and thank you, Troy, for joining us today.
Oh my goodness, this was such a lovely chat, Troy. Thank you.
Yes,
thank you, guys. This was
in,
a blast.
All these things you've shown us.
Yeah,
This
was a blast. You guys are awesome.
Oh, yeah.
I'll come back and chat with you anytime you want.
We would love that. We would love that. I feel like there's so many other questions I have. Like, tell me the trends you've seen in industry and like all of that. So tell me all of the things you know, Troy.
Hey, no problem. I'll come back anytime you want. We can talk about whatever topic you want. It's great.
I love it. I love it. Well, listener, you have a lovely day, and we'll talk to you later.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Bye.